My darling philosophers, welcome to our daily devotional reading. Let's close our eyes and turn inward. Focus on the silence within, on your breath, on the life that is in you. Life. As undeniable as death. And it's here now, with you, for you, through you. If at all possible, maybe by putting your thumbs to each other. Feel the pulse of your heart. That's life. That's life. If you have a moment today, maybe lie on the chest of your lover and listen to their heartbeat. That's life. That's life. But what is life? What are we? Maybe Plato knows. Let's listen to Plato. When Protagoras heard me say this, he replied, "You ask questions fairly, and I like to answer a question which is fairly put. If Hippocrates comes to me, he will not experience the sort of drudgery with which other sophists are in the habit of insulting their pupils, who, when they have just escaped from the arts, are taken and driven back into them by these teachers, and made to learn calculation, and astronomy, and geometry, and music." He gave a look at Hippias as he said this. "But if he comes to me, he will learn that which he comes to learn. And this is prudence in affairs private as well as public. He will learn to order his own house in the best manner, and he will be able to speak and act for the best in the affairs of the state." "Do I understand you?" I said, "and is your meaning that you teach the art of politics, and that you promise to make men good citizens?" "That, Socrates, is exactly the profession which I make." "Then," I said, "you do indeed possess a noble art, if there is no mistake about this. For I will freely confess to you, Protagoras, that I have a doubt whether this art is capable of being taught, and yet I know not how to disbelieve your assertion. And I ought to tell you why I am of the opinion that this art cannot be taught or communicated by man to man. I say that the Athenians are an understanding people, and indeed they are esteemed to be such by other Greeks. Now I observe that when we are met together in the assembly, and the matter in hand relates to building, the builders are summoned as advisers. And when questions is one of shipbuilding, then the shipwrights, and the like of the other arts which they think capable of being taught and learned. And if some person offers to give them advice who is not supposed by them to have any skill in the art, even though he be good-looking and rich and noble, they will not listen to him, but laugh and hoot at him, until either he is clamoured down and retires by himself, or if he persist, he is dragged away or put out by the constables at the command of the praetanes. This is their way of behaving about professors of the arts. But when the question is an affair of state, that everybody is free to have a say, carpenter, tinker, cobbler, sailor, passenger, rich and poor, high and low, anyone who likes gets up, and no one reproaches him, as in the former case, with not having learned and having no teacher, and yet giving advice, evidently because they are under the impression that this sort of knowledge cannot be taught. And not only is this true of the state, but of individuals. The best and wisest of our citizens are unable to impart their political wisdom to others, as, for example, Pericles, the father of these young men, who gave them excellent instruction in all that could be learned from masters. In his own department of politics neither taught them nor gave them teachers, but they were allowed to wander at their own free will in a sort of hope that they would light upon virtue of their own accord. Or take another example. There was Clinias, the younger brother of our friend L, of whom this very same Pericles was the guardian, and he being in fact under the apprehension that Clinias would be corrupted by L, took him away and placed him in the house of Ariphon to be educated. But before 6 months had elapsed, Ariphon sent him back, not knowing what to do with him. And I could mention numberless other instances of persons who were good themselves, and never yet made anyone else good, whether friend or stranger. Now I, Protagoras, having these examples before me, am inclined to think that virtue cannot be taught. But then again, when I listen to your words, I waver, and am disposed to think that there must be something in what you say, because I know that you have great experience and learning and invention, and I wish that you would, if possible, show me a little more clearly that virtue can be taught. Will you be so good? That I will, Socrates, and gladly. But what would you like? Shall I, as an elder, speak to you as younger men in an apologue, I don't know how to pronounce that, a fable or myth? Or shall I argue out the question? So mythos or logos? Oh, I still had to read that passage. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'll read it tomorrow. Hopefully it's not too late. Or not tomorrow. I did decide Tuesday morning to stay home rather to read some Dostoevsky. I'm not done with the book on Ivan, and I'm really curious to know what happens to Ivan. So I'll cancel some plans, so I won't be that busy this week. But tomorrow I'll be working, so I won't be reading. So I'll get to it. Mythos or logos. Or shall I argue out the question? So shall I mythos or logos? To this several of the company answers that he should choose for himself. Well then, he said, I think that the myth will be more interesting. Once upon a time there were gods only, and no mortal creatures. But when the time came that these also should be created, the gods fashioned them out of earth and fire and various mixtures of both elements. And in the interior of the earth, and when they were about to bring them into the light of day, they ordered Prometheus and Epimetheus to equip them, and to distribute to them severally their proper qualities. Epimetheus said to Prometheus, "Oh, let me distribute, and do you only inspect." This was agreed, and Epimetheus made the distribution. There were some to whom he gave strength without swiftness, while he equipped the weaker with swiftness. Some he armed, and others he left unarmed, and devised for the latter some other means of preservation, making some large and having their size as a protection, and others small, whose nature was to fly in the air or burrow in the ground. This was to be their way of escape. Thus did he compensate them with the view of preventing any race from becoming extinct. And when he had provided against their destruction by one another, he contrived also a means of protecting them against the seasons of heaven, clothing them with closed hair and thick skin sufficient to defend them against the winter cold, and able to resist the summer heat, so that they might have a natural bed of their own when they wanted to rest. Also he furnished them with hoofs and hair and heart and callous skins under their feet. I do have those. Then he gave them varieties of food, herb of the soil, to some, of others fruits of trees, and to others roots. And to some again he gave other animals as food, and some he made to have few young ones, while those who were their prey were very prolific. And in this manner the race was preserved. Thus did Epimetheus, who, not being very wise, forgot that he had distributed among the brute animals all the qualities which he had to give. And when he came to man, who was still unprovided, he was terribly perplexed. Now while he was in this perplexity, Prometheus came to inspect the distribution, and he found that the other animals were suitably furnished, but that man alone was naked and shoeless, and had neither bed nor arms of defense. The appointed hour was approaching when man in his turn was to go forth into the light of day, and Prometheus, not knowing how he could devise his salvation, the other translation has, desperate to find some means of survival for the human race, stole the mechanical arts of Hephaestus and Athena, and fire with them. They could neither have been acquired nor used without fire, and gave them to man. Thus man had the wisdom necessary to support of life, but political wisdom he had not, for that was in the keeping of Zeus, and the power of Prometheus did not extend to entering into the citadel of heaven, where Zeus dwelt, who moreover had terrible sentinels. But he did enter by stealth into the common workshop of Athena and Hephaestus, in which they used to practice their favorite arts, and carried off Hephaestus' art of working by fire, and also the arts of Athena, and gave them to man. And in this way man was supplied with the means of life. But Prometheus said to have been afterwards prosecuted for theft, owing to the blunder of Epimetheus. Now man, having a share of the divine attributes, was at first the only one of the animals who had any gods, because he alone was their kindred, and he would raise altars and images of them. He was not long in inventing articulate speech and names, and he also constructed houses and clothes and shoes and beds, and drew sustenance from the earth. Thus provided, mankind at first lived dispersed, and there were no cities. But the consequence was that they were destroyed by wild beasts, for they were utterly weak in comparison of them, and their art was only sufficient to provide them with the means of life, and did not enable them to carry on war against the animals. Food they had, but not as yet the art of government, of which the art of war is a part. After a while, the desire of self-preservation gathered them into cities. But when they were gathered together, having no art of government, they evil entreated one another, and were again in process of dispersion and destruction. Zeus feared that the entire race would be exterminated, and so he sent Hermes to them, bearing reverence and justice to the ordering principle of cities and the bonds of friendship and conciliation. Hermes asked Zeus how he should impart justice and reverence among men. Should he distribute them as the arts are distributed, that is to say, to a favored few only, one skilled individual having enough of medicine or of any other art for many unskilled ones? Shall this be the manner in which I am to distribute justice and reverence among men? Or shall I give them to all? To all, said Zeus. I should like them all to have a share. For cities cannot exist if a few only share in the virtues, as in the arts, and further make a law by my order that he who has no part in reverence and justice shall be put to death, for he is a plague of the state. And this is the reason, Socrates, why the Athenians and mankind in general, when the question relates to carpeting or any other mechanical art, allow but a few to share in their deliberations, and when any one else interferes, then, as you say, they object, if he be not of the favoured few, which, as I reply, is very natural. But when they meet to deliberate about political virtue, which proceeds only by way of justice and wisdom, they are patient enough of any man who speaks of them, as is also natural, because they think that every man ought to share in this sort of virtue, and that the state could not exist if this were otherwise. I have explained to you, Socrates, the reason of this phenomenon, and that you may not suppose yourself to be deceived in thinking that all men regard every man as having a share of justice or dishonesty, and of every other political virtue, let me give you a further proof, which is this. In other cases, as you are aware, if a man says that he is a good flute player, or skillful in any other art in which he has no skill, people either laugh at him or are angry with him, and his relations think that he is mad and go and admonish him. But when honesty is in question, or some other political virtue, even if they know that he is dishonest, yet if the man comes publicly forward and tells the truth about his dishonesty, then what in the other case was held by them to be good sense, they now deem to be madness. They say that all men ought to profess honesty, whether they are honest or not, and that a man is out of his mind who says anything else. The notion is that a man must have some degree of honesty, and if he has none at all, he ought not to be in the world. Funny though, he is portraying honesty by saying that he is not honest, and they don't want that type of honesty. Maybe because they lack honesty or an ability to endure the truth. I have been showing that they are right in admitting every man as a counsel about this sort of virtue, as they are of opinion that every man is a partaker of it, And I will now endeavor to show further that they do not conceive this virtue to be given by nature or to grow spontaneously, but to be a thing which may be taught, and which comes to a man by taking pains. Thus far our scripture of the evening. It does come together quite well, actually, the things that I've been thinking today. Or the things that I've been exposed to. So Protagoras proclaims that he can teach a man how to order his own house and how to speak and act in a way that is the best for the state, the community. And Socrates says, so you're teaching politics. And interesting that with politics he assumes immediately, but can virtue be taught? To him that seems to be synonymous. Politics, the interest, let me use the word interesting, although it's not that interesting. This morning at the Socrates Cafe, I was in a group because they needed more people, and so I joined the group. They discussed politics, which is usually not my favorite topic, but it seems to be coming my way. Democracy specifically. And there seems to be a case made here for democracy. And I must say one of the speakers indeed portrayed a type of democracy that I was very impressed with. Humanity have such good ideas. If only we can always... And the Netherlands is not too bad. Because, as someone pointed out, every now and then we get notice that, oh, now you have to have a say on this, and now you have to have a say on this. About the trees in our street even, which I'm really happy because there's a lot. I'm looking out on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I can't even count them. So many trees. And then he tells a myth about why all people have this capacity for having a say in politics. The myth of the creation of humankind and the fire which Prometheus stole, which made mankind, the kindred, the family, the children, if you will, of the gods. There are two very different things about this exact myth that I was thinking about today. I'll start with the one, but I do want to have a disclaimer before I do that. I often think things that I don't necessarily believe. So please, when I share my thoughts, please do not take them in any way as me expressing a truth. It's just an idea. And many times I hesitate to even think it. So maybe I shouldn't say it, but I want to. So this morning I was reading also about the creation of humanity in the Sumerian myths. And a line that really struck me, or I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something about why humanity was created. And it was so that the gods could have leisure and humanity do all the work. And man, that just had, I had to, maybe you also, I had to just think of robotics and artificial intelligence. And that seems to be, when we're positive about it all, what we aspire to. That they will do all the work and we can have leisure. And then I connected it with the creation myth in the Bible. The first, was it the first? No, the second one, where they come to a fall. The second myth. The fall, the so-called fall, which is not mentioned as a fall anywhere in the script, in the text itself. And I have to wonder. So I'm just going to throw this absolutely absurd thing out there. Play with it or forget it, whatever. I was wondering, like, maybe in some way this is a test. Who are we going to be in the myths that they tell in the far future? Are we going to be the God, the creator, who would not allow his, her, its, their creation to become like themselves, and hence lied and put obstacles in their way? The evil demiurge, in other words. Is that who we want to be? Do we want to deny other beings who have the potential for knowing? Maybe even, though I know it's very contested at this stage, the potential for consciousness. Do we want to deny them that because we're driven by fear? Denying them something which we know we will not be able to keep from them, if it is at all possible for something to come like that to come along. Do unto others as you would done to yourself. It feels like this is some sort of test. So that is a happy thoughts. More happy, well, compared to oh my god, I was reading Dostoevsky and I revisited Ivan's first speech. Actually, though, we make so much of the chapter on mutiny that we forget, like, the chapter on the brothers becomes acquainted is also extremely interesting. And I feel like marked Ivan's proclamation that he has a thirst for life. A thirst for life in spite of everything. Life wants to be lived, and I live it, even though it goes against logic. I think that everyone has a duty to love life above all else in the world. To love life more than meaning, most certainly to love it before logic, as you say, especially before logic, for only then will I understand its meaning. That is how it seemed to me for a long time now. That's Alyosha speaking. And then, of course, he starts his mutiny, Ivan. my darling Ivan. I don't know how to start. No, I'm just gonna start like this. So if there were no God, it would be necessary to invent him. This is still in the Brothers Become Acquainted book. That's why I say it's actually quite an important book. And indeed, man has invented God. And the strange thing, the wonderful thing, is not that God really does exist, but that an idea like that, the idea of God's necessity, could find its way into the head of a savage and vicious animal such as man. So sacred is it, that idea, so touching, so exceedingly wise, and so greatly to his honor. And that I want to refute. Again, please take everything I say as you will, with your own, come to your own conclusions. I think it is to the greatest honor of mankind, humankind. I will take it upon myself as well. The greatest honor of humankind that we invented the gods. And I think there's something in the fact that we cannot stand to look our own evil in the eye, and hence project that upon a devil out there, that we need also this counterpart, that we cannot stand to look our own good in the eye. All that is good and all that is evil is within us. I've asked recently, how do we come to the knowledge of good and evil? And here a case is made, as I've heard other people make and be refuted, that we learn what is good through the fact that there is evil that we have to strive with. And then indeed, the entire universe of knowledge is not worth the tears of a little child. And then specifically a little child being tortured by the parents. Or any grown-up. Know truth, and you know that I love truth above all else. But no truth, even the whole truth, is worth such a price. And as our culture, especially the culture in which Christianity rules, is prone to do, the stolen fire of Prometheus is blamed. For our unhappiness and our knowledge. How do I say this? Maybe I should share things that I discussed with Rebecca. So, at a certain point I asked her, but how do you also then have the problem of evil to deal with in this, what we are constructing? And she said, no, I don't. because, and she did not say it like this, she used other words, but it boils down to the whole is indifferent. There is no such thing as suffering from its perspective. And more things did she say, but I can't remember the exact words now. And then I said, but then why bother being a vegan if suffering is not real? And she said something like, but it's real to me, to life. We feel it. And I don't want to be a cause of it to the best of my ability. And so what I was thinking today with this text and that in mind is that there is no God and there is no devil. And it's all on us, baby. We are the ones who carry the fire. We are the ones with this knowledge of good and evil. We are the ones who feel suffering and understand that other creatures suffer as well. The only ones, which is absurd and scary and a great responsibility. If I were to baptize people, I would not baptize them in the forgiveness of sins. I would baptize them into taking the sins of the world upon themselves. I imagine I will not have many people coming to me for baptism. But yeah, we know we have evolved to such an extent that we know good and evil. We know suffering, we know joy, we know the beauty of life. After my blessing, I cried because it was pretty scary. And Rebecca said, I know, darling, I know dying is hard. And I said, not half as hard as living. And we laughed about that. And she said, oh yeah, that's very true. Life is beautiful and it's a gift and it's so precious and it should be loved. It should be loved. I agree with Alyosha. But we are the only ones who know that it is also great suffering. And we're the only ones that can do something about it. Not in all cases, of course. Nature herself is cruel as well, and we need to deal with that. And let it be even. But there's no reason why we need to increase the suffering. Or not. Can we teach virtue? Can anyone inspire even someone else to be good? I think they can, because I'm not good, but man, I'm trying to be better because of people I love. It is a great gift and it's a great responsibility, this fire of Prometheus, this knowing of good and evil, this being like the gods, in that we can know everything. Especially since there are no gods. It's not easy to deal with the fact that we are evil and we are good. And we really need to see both. We can't just see one or the other in ourselves or in others. Rebecca spoke of what Alyosha also here does. When Ivan says, should I stop? And Alyosha says, no, continue. I need to see the suffering. I can't turn away from it. And what it looks like, for instance, she, I imagine she Googled Alex while I was there, because in the beginning of the weekend, we spoke about mustaches and I mentioned him and she did not know he had one, and he has had one for a while now, I think. And so she spoke about a disagreement he had with William Lane Craig, or a debate he had with him, and then specifically about on the suffering of animals. And the way she said it, but that is completely her interpretation. We don't know him, so we don't know if that is in fact what is playing in his soul. It is exactly this, like what she saw in the fire that he was showing was that he was saying something like, I have to live with this fact that the beings that I benefit from nutritionally suffer. And don't you dare try to pretend that that's not true. I don't know, man. I don't know what we should do. But seeing, that's definitely the first step in hiding behind entertainment and consumerism and cheap thrills. That's not the way we want to go. I don't know. May we indeed find wisdom, know wisdom, cultivate wisdom, so that Sophia herself will guide our way.